At some point, you start to notice something. No one is really telling you what to do, not in a clear way. There are expectations, advice, paths that seem more acceptable than others. But underneath all of that, there is no fixed direction, no single answer, no defined script for how your life is supposed to unfold. And at first, that can feel like freedom. You can choose, you can change direction. You are not completely locked into one path, but if you stay with that feeling a little longer, something else begins to appear. Because if no one is deciding for you, then who is? And that's where the weight starts to build. Most of the time, this question stays in the background. You move through your days, you make decisions, you follow routines, without really thinking about what's underneath them. But every now and then, it becomes clear. You are the one making the choices, even the small ones. What you do, what you avoid, what you pursue, what you ignore. And once you see that, it becomes difficult to unsee. Because now things are different. Now it's not just that you can choose, it's that you are already choosing all the time. This is the point where existentialism begins, not as a theory, not as a set of ideas, but as a recognition, a way of seeing your own life more clearly. Existentialism is often described as a philosophical movement, something that emerged in Europe, particularly in the 19th and 20th centuries. And historically, that's true. Thinkers like Søren Kierkegaard, Jean-Paul Sartre, and later Albert Camus all explored questions about existence, freedom, and meaning. But if you approach existentialism only as history, you miss what it is actually pointing to. Because existentialism is not just about what these thinkers wrote, it's about what they were trying to describe. At its core, existentialism begins with a simple idea. There is no predefined way you are supposed to be, no fixed identity waiting to be discovered, no built-in purpose that determines your path. You are not given a script. You are not assigned a role. Instead, you exist first, and then, through your actions, you define who you are. This is what Sartre meant when he said, "Existence precedes essence." It sounds abstract, but the idea itself is direct. You are not born with a finished identity. You become who you are through what you do, through your decisions, your habits, your responses, through the way you live. And at first, this can sound empowering. If nothing is fixed, then everything is open. You can become anything. You can shape your life. There is no predetermined limit. But existentialism doesn't stop there, because that same idea has another side. If nothing defines you in advance, then nothing excuses you either. You can't point to a fixed nature. You can't say, "This is just who I am." You can't rely on a predefined path to carry you forward. Instead, you are responsible. Not just for the big decisions, but for everything, for how you respond to situations, for what you accept, for what you tolerate, even for what you avoid. This is where existentialism becomes uncomfortable, because it removes something people often rely on, the ability to step back from responsibility, to say, "I didn't really have a choice. This is just how things are. This is what people expect." Existentialism challenges that. It suggests that even when things feel fixed, there is still a choice involved, even if that choice is difficult, even if it's limited, even if it's uncomfortable. You are still participating in it. You are still deciding how you respond. This is what gives existentialism its weight. It doesn't just say that you are free. It says that you are responsible for what you do with that freedom. And that combination, freedom and responsibility, is not always easy to carry. Kierkegaard, one of the earliest thinkers associated with existentialism, described something he called anxiety. Not anxiety in the modern clinical sense, but something more fundamental, a kind of unease that comes from possibility. When everything is open, when there is no fixed path, you are faced with choices, and with each choice, you are shaping your life. That awareness can feel overwhelming, because it means that what you become is not something that simply happens to you. It is something that is built, moment by moment, through what you do. Sartre later described this in a more direct way. He argued that people often try to escape this responsibility, to avoid the weight of freedom. He called this bad faith. Bad faith is not about lying to others. It's about lying to yourself, about pretending that you are less free than you actually are. For example, you might stay in a situation you don't want to be in while telling yourself you have no choice. You might follow a path that doesn't feel right because it seems expected. You might define yourself by a role, a job, a label, a position, and treat it as something fixed. In each case, you reduce your own responsibility. You act as if your life is already decided. But existentialism pushes against that. It suggests that even in those situations, you are still choosing. Even if that choice is to stay. Even if that choice is to avoid change. And that's where the discomfort comes from. Because once you see it, it becomes harder to deny. Now, this doesn't mean that everything is easy, or that you can simply choose anything at any time. There are real constraints, circumstances, limits, situations you didn't choose. Existentialism doesn't ignore that, but it focuses on something else. Not what happens to you, but how you respond to it. And that is where your freedom exists. Not as a perfect, unlimited power, but as something more precise. The ability to choose your actions, even within limits. And over time, those actions accumulate, they form patterns, they shape your character, they define who you become. So, when existentialism says that you create your own meaning, it doesn't mean that you sit down and decide it once. It means that meaning emerges from the way you live, from what you commit to, from what you pursue, from what you repeat. It is not something you discover fully formed. It is something that takes shape through your actions. And that makes it different from many other ways of thinking. Because instead of asking, what is the meaning of life? Existentialism shifts the question. It becomes, what are you doing with your life? And that question doesn't have a single answer. It changes, depending on what you do. This is why existentialism doesn't offer comfort in the usual sense. It doesn't give you a clear path. It doesn't tell you what you should become. It doesn't provide a final answer you can rely on. Instead, it places something back in your hands. The responsibility to shape your own life. And that responsibility is always there. Not just in big moments, but in small ones. In what you choose to do today, in how you respond to situations, in what you allow to continue. Even doing nothing is part of it, because not choosing is still a form of choice, and over time, those choices add up. They form a direction, not because it was planned in advance, but because it was lived. So when you look at your life through this lens, something becomes clearer. You are not simply following a path, you are building one. And whether that feels heavy or meaningful depends on how you see it. But either way, it remains true. There is no one else who can live it for you, and no point where that responsibility disappears, which means that, in the end, existentialism is not just an idea. It is a way of looking at your life without stepping away from it, without handing it over, without pretending that someone else is deciding. It is the recognition that whether you notice it or not, it is already up to you. If you want to go deeper into these ideas, we recommend the book Existentialism is a Humanism by Jean-Paul Sartre. It explores freedom, responsibility, and what it means to shape your life through the choices you make. You'll find a link to the book in the description and in the pinned comment. You can also explore more philosophy and psychology books through our bookshop page. Ordering books from bookshop.org supports the channel and independent bookstores. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing for more videos like this. Leave a comment and share your experience. Thank you for watching.